Welcome to Echoes of Time, a journey into the forgotten worlds and the secrets they left behind.
For decades, the towering stone pillars of Göbekli Tepe have been this huge, unsolvable mystery. But some incredible recent discoveries have uncovered a hidden pattern, one that doesn't just solve the puzzle, it completely rewrites the story of how human civilization even began. Okay, let's dive into this. I mean, what if everything we thought we knew about our ancient past is backwards? You know, the idea that first we invented farming, then we built cities, and then finally we built big temples. This isn't just some old ruin. This place is a piece of evidence that shatters that entire timeline of human progress. And our story starts here, over 11,600 years ago. Now, to put that in perspective, that's more than 6,000 years before the pyramids. This is long before we thought hunter-gatherers were capable of anything more than just basic survival. But something absolutely incredible was happening in ancient Turkey. To really get how big of a breakthrough this is, we first have to wrap our heads around the puzzle that had archaeologists totally stumped for decades. And it's a mystery that starts with one man standing on a hill, pretty much convinced he'd found something that just shouldn't exist. That man was Klaus Schmidt. And what he started to find just didn't fit any known historical model. I mean, he wasn't just digging up pottery shards or arrowheads. He was uncovering the world's very first monumental architecture, built by people we all assumed were just living in small nomadic bands. And the sheer scale of it all is it's staggering. We're talking about these massive T-shaped limestone pillars, some of them standing 6 meters tall, weighing as much as 10 tons. And they weren't blank either. Their surfaces were just alive with these intricate carvings of foxes and vultures and scorpions. It was like a prehistoric art gallery and an engineering marvel all rolled into one. So the initial theory was, okay, this must be the world's first temple. But that simple explanation created this deep, baffling contradiction that would pretty much define the site for years and years. And this slide just illustrates the central problem perfectly. On one side, you have this massive, complex, ritualistic site. But on the other, there was nothing else. No houses, no cooking fires, zero signs of agriculture, not even a single human burial. It was like finding a cathedral without a congregation, a city with no citizens. How on earth could they build this with no village anywhere nearby? For nearly 2 decades, researchers just meticulously excavated each of these enclosures one by one. But this approach, while it was really thorough, it was kind of like studying individual trees and completely missing the forest. They were so focused on the details inside each circle that they just couldn't see the bigger picture. The idea that maybe, just maybe, the real meaning was in the connections between them. And this is where the story takes a huge turn, because it would take a radical shift in perspective and some new technology to finally see the blueprint that was hiding in plain sight the entire time. A new team, led by a Professor Barbara Hires, came in with a completely different strategy. Instead of just digging one hole at a time, they decided they were going to map the entire site, what was visible and what was still buried, as one single interconnected system. So, using ground-penetrating radar, they scanned right beneath the surface, revealing the full extent of everything that lay hidden. And for the very first time, they weren't just looking at a few isolated circles, they were seeing the whole complex, ready to finally connect the dots. And when that full map was rendered, what emerged was not some random scatter of enclosures. No, it was a precise, deliberate, geometric pattern that had been totally invisible to everyone who came before. And here is the stunning discovery. 3 of the largest enclosures formed an almost perfect equilateral triangle. The distance between the center of each one was 19.25 meters, with a teeny tiny margin of error. This wasn't a coincidence. This was a blueprint. These hunter-gatherers, with no written language, no metal tools, they were working from a master plan. So the geometry was one huge part of the code. But what about all those animal carvings? Well, researchers soon discovered they weren't just decoration either. They were another whole layer of the system. A team, led by Dr. Lina Yilmaz, cataloged the positions of every single animal motif across the entire site. And they found a strict set of rules guiding which animals appeared where. This was a language, carved right into the stone. And you could see just how this code works. Vultures, for instance, are always found at the top of pillars, facing east. which aligns with the sunrise. Scorpions, they show up low on the southern faces, likely marking a specific season or a time for hunting. These carvings were basically a shared calendar, a schedule for rituals, telling all these different groups when to gather and what to celebrate. But maybe the most astounding discovery of all wasn't how Göbekli Tepe was built, but how its story actually ended. This was not a site that was just left to crumble into ruin. You see, the final act at Göbekli Tepe was a deliberate act of closure. Its builders, after using it for centuries, carefully and intentionally buried their own monuments under tons and tons of stone, sealing them away for millennia. And we know this was intentional because the analysis of the fill material is unmistakable. It's clean rubble from a quarry, not natural sediment that built up over time. It was dumped in there in a single massive effort. They weren't just walking away, they were performing a final grand ritual, basically putting it to sleep. The scale is it's hard to even imagine. To bury just one of the main enclosures, workers would have had to move over 1,200 tons of stone. And an effort like that, well, it would have required hundreds of people, all working together, all driven by the same shared purpose. This level of coordination was something we thought was totally impossible for a pre-agricultural society. So what does this all mean? The geometry, the symbolic code, the deliberate burial? It all comes together to tell a brand new story about our own origins. When you put all the pieces together, the conclusion is unavoidable. Göbekli Tepe proves that large-scale human cooperation, driven by shared beliefs and complex knowledge, came thousands of years before the invention of farming. And it's not alone. Similar sites like Karhan Tepe, just 35 kilometers away, suggest a whole network of communities linked by this common purpose. The old timeline of civilization is being completely rewritten right before our eyes. In the end, the real secret of Göbekli Tepe isn't what's buried in the stone. It's a challenge to how we see ourselves and our own potential. It proves our ancestors were more organized, more knowledgeable, and more collaborative than we ever gave them credit for. And it leaves us with one really profound question. What else about our past have we completely overlooked?
This was Echoes of Time. If you love powerful history stories, subscribe and continue the journey with us.